Good morning and welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social. It is Friday the 15th of September 2023. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're heading to the final straight now. We're not that far off from Christmas. The year is coming to an end. That was quick, wasn't it? Anyway, so lots of things to talk about today. First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to John Bull for the £5 super chat saying, morning all. Those of us living in Scotland wonder about Labour's view on devolution and possible independence referendum. Our prob is SNP, less Tory. I don't know, prob is probably or problem. But yeah, I mean, Labour, through a series of unforced errors on behalf of the SNP, looks like Labour might be able to pick up quite a few seats in the next election. We're going to have to see, because in Margaret Farrier's old constituency in Scotland, she was the SNP candidate who took a train when she had COVID. I know, disgraceful behaviour, and it was quite right that she was basically, in the end, sacked as an MP as a result of it, which is something that should have happened to Boris Johnson and all of the people who attended his parties, and that includes our current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Just a little bit of a BTW there, as the kids say. Actually, it's quicker to just say, by the way, isn't it? Anyway, so there's a chance in this by-election for Labour to win. I think that will be a great sort of bellwether, as they call it, to see how Labour are looking realistically in Scotland in the next election. However, the polls are so tragically bad for the Tories right now. Scotland, well, Labour might not need to take Scottish seats in order to win a majority. But I would like to see a little bit more plurality in Scotland, because at the moment, nearly all the seats in Scotland are taken by the SNP. And I don't think that's particularly good for democracy. I don't like having a one-party state in any way, shape or form, even if that party's doing quite well, or not, as the case may be. But it's one of the reasons why I don't like the first past the post system we have in Westminster. It gives a grotesquely distorted power dynamic where people who got 43% of the vote have 80 more seats than all the other parties put together. And you're like, how does that work? So they got 43% of the seats, so 57% of people voted for other parties, and yet they've got a majority above all the other parties put together of 80. How does that work? Exactly. And then if you look at the way the Scottish Assembly is run, which is more on, I think it's the D'Hondt system, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but they use a slightly different system. They don't use first past the post. And as a result, it's not like across the board, everyone in the Scottish Parliament is SNP, which I think is a good thing. I think that it's good to have that balance. Also, what would be good is if the Tories get so trounced in the next election that they are actually put into third place, or maybe fourth place behind the Lib Dems and the SNP. Who knows? Could happen. I just can't get over that poll. It came out in December. I think it was a YouGov poll. I hadn't seen it until the other day. It's amazing how these things just pass you by. But it showed that in this poll of a representative sample of 18 to 24-year-olds, only 2% were intending to vote Conservative in the next election. Not to say that 98% are going to vote Labour, but only 2% said they were going to vote Tory in the next election. That tells you pretty much everything you need to know. So what I want to talk about to start with today, and then I'll get into the papers and other things, is what's dominating a few of the newspapers today, like the Daily Express. I'll show you the Daily Express front page here. A dirty deal. Suella, she's just one name now, like Madonna. Suella slams Labour's EU migrant plan. And, it warms the cockles of my cold, dead heart when I see this, oh God, I don't want to do in the intro sequence again. It warms the cockles of my cold, dead heart when I see the Express and the Mail freaking out about something. So, what are they freaking out about? Just so you know, while the Prime Minister was arsing around somewhere in his private jet, presumably, the Labour Party, representative of the Labour Party, it was Keir Starmer and Shadow Home Secretary, whose name has currently escaped me for a moment, wife of Ed Balls, you know, the one. Oh God, this is embarrassing. Anyway, they went over to The Hague and to talk about how we're going to deal with people coming into Europe. Not just the UK, but into Europe. And I really, really welcome this. I mean, absolutely, this is something that needs cross EU support and working together with other countries in Europe that might not necessarily be in the EU in order to bring a fair and equitable refugee system that doesn't penalise people for asking for help. That's what we do in this country. So a child comes here asking for help, we put them in a detention centre with paedophiles. A mother comes here pleading for help, a genuine refugee from Afghanistan. And what we want to do is send her to Rwanda. And even if she's found to be a genuine, absolute 100% real refugee running away from the Taliban, she will have to stay in Rwanda for the rest of her life. That's what the current government want to do, and it's absolutely abhorrent. It's absolutely inhumane. Now, what I would like to see is safe routes set up. That is my number one objective, but that can't be done alone. We can't just set that up in the UK on our own because it's not fair on the people having to make their way across Europe. I mean, maybe you could make an argument, well, they don't have to come across in small boats. Well, yeah, it would stop the small boats overnight. But this is a Europe-wide problem, and I don't see why Italy and Greece should bear the brunt of people coming over in boats as opposed to Sweden or Norway just because of geography. I think that we're all part of this together. We're all in Europe. All us Europeans are all in Europe. And I think we should be working. Yvette Cooper, thank you very much, Aid. God, I don't know why that fell out my head. I think we should be working together for a common refugee strategy. And the way it'll work is this. People can apply from whatever country they're in. So if they've escaped Sudan into Egypt, they can apply in Egypt. So it's not a case of them having to take a small boat across the water. If they can get out of Libya to Tunisia, they can claim asylum in Europe in Tunisia. So they go to the EU outreach assembly, high commission, embassy, whatever you want to call it. They go there and they say, look, I want to, I'm here with my family and I hereby officially claim asylum, however you do it. And then they should be brought to Europe by safe means, not on a rickety boat, paying people smugglers who are scum. And, one of the things that people objected to was Keir Starmer calling people smugglers terrorists. And they are. They terrorise people. But only as far as the Tories are terrorists, because the Tories facilitate the existence of people smugglers. If it wasn't for the Tories and their absolutely disgraceful, toxic attitude towards people asking for help, there wouldn't be any people smugglers because there wouldn't be any money to be made. It's like legalizing drugs. If you legalize drugs, you wouldn't have any drug pushers. Why would you push drugs when you ain't going to make any money out of it? Why would you do it? The reasons for legalizing drugs, but that's a discussion for another day. We're talking about refugees today and asylum seekers and people trying to flee where they are for a better life. This really does need to be an EU-wide scheme. And what would happen in an ideal world is that the EU and, well, let's say the Council of Europe, let's bring everyone on board on this, have a quota for each country based on population size, GDP, and need. So that if there is someone who turns up at this, refugee centre in Tunisia, which the EU pays for, and we pay for that, Europe pays for it, and they say, "Oh, what's your profession?" And they say, "I'm an architect, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a nurse, or and they say, "Okay, well, we need more nurses in Sweden, so you can go to Sweden." Or they might say, "What languages do you speak?" Well, if they're coming from Algeria, they'll probably speak French. So, okay, you're coming from Algeria. Do you want to go to France, Andorra, somewhere where they speak French, Switzerland? Okay, right. You get allocated to that country, and there is a way of making a fair system set up where we can do this, where we can actually make it so that refugees coming over are housed, are given a job straight away. They start working straight away. They start paying tax on their earnings straight away. We don't have this 2-year, 3-year wait where they're not allowed to work and they're put up in hotels, and we get the baby Stockholm and it costs £1.6 billion. And no, stop that. Stop it. It's so stupid. It's so like banging your head against the wall. Now look, if Starmer was calling the refugees terrorists, I would have a huge problem with that. But he's not. He was calling the people smugglers terrorists. And I don't really have a problem with that, because I call the Tories terrorists all the time, because they are. They terrorize people. They make people live in terror, which is the definition of a terrorist. And Labour's other plans include, for this country, setting up something akin to the Nightingale hospitals. I know they were a disaster, a big white elephant of the Tory idiocy, but setting something up of that sort of level to process the claims that are already here. Because we have over 100,000 people who have come across the channel in small boats, who are forced to come across the channel in small boats because there's no other way of claiming asylum here. There are no safe routes unless you are coming from Hong Kong or Ukraine or possibly Afghanistan, but that's a bit dicey. There are no safe routes. The only way you can claim asylum if you come from Algeria or from Libya or from Eritrea or from Yemen or from Tajikistan or Turkmenistan or any of the countries that people are coming from. The only way you can claim asylum in this country is by setting foot on the soil of this country and saying, I want asylum. It feels like a stupid game, like one of those arcane rules from some sort of fantasy realm, you know, where you step foot into the Golden Bough woods and you're like, oh, well, you know, I'm in the woods now. You can't catch me, copper. And you're like, okay, that doesn't make much sense, but, you know, it's the forest is the forest of asylum and you step foot in it. So there you go. But what we've done is we've dug a moat around the forest of asylum and infested it with crocodiles, and we're like, yeah, jump across the crocodile infested moat and then you can have asylum. And it's like, why are you making me do this? Why can't I just apply from where I am? It's just like, yeah. Anyway, so the idea of getting tough on people smugglers, which is what the message that Labour needs to get across. This is not about necessarily people who are coming here to claim asylum, because that is completely legal. It always has been, and it always will be. People have always claimed asylum in this country, even before it was codified. And in Article 14 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, it was a thing. People could come here and claim asylum, and they did. And we had the same backlash in the Express and the Mail and all those scumbag newspapers in the 1930s about Jews coming over here. The reason why the kinder transport only took children was because the British government, the British people, the British tabloids did not want, well, they weren't tabloids back then, but the British newspapers did not want Jewish people coming here. Because apparently, you know, back in the 30s, we were full. Yeah, well, the population was like 45 million. Yeah, we were full. We were full back then. God knows what it's like now. We've got 68 million people living here. Anyway, so yeah, it was just the Guardian trying to rile up their anti-Labour base. Yeah, I don't really see how someone coming from the left, you could look at this and go, that's terrible. That's a terrible idea. Getting rid of the backlog, you know, getting people, because don't forget, like something ridiculous, like 87% of the people who apply for asylum here get it because they're genuine asylum seekers. There's a really good way of like sussing out if someone's a genuine asylum seeker or not. You go, are you a woman? Yes. Well, you probably are almost 100% going to be a genuine asylum seeker. Are you a child? Yes. Okay. Well, you're 100% going to be a genuine asylum seeker. There's no child who is going to make the journey from Eritrea all the way to the UK because they want a job in McDonald's. Just the idea of it is offensive. It's absolutely offensive. Now, there's more stuff that the EU need to do as well. And I say EU, I mean Europe, I mean just the whole of it, right? A lot of the problems that we have around the world have come about because of Europe. There you go. That's just a fact. You look at the problems that people are facing in Africa, in South America, Central America, the Caribbean, all across Asia. Places where Europeans went and mucked everything up. I'll give you an example. Tonga. No, Fiji. Fiji. Let's talk about Fiji. So in Fiji, there were people living there for thousands of years, Polynesians. And they had their own way of doing things. They lived a tribal life and they went seafaring. And luckily for them, there was enough fish in the sea and enough coconuts growing on the trees for them to sustain themselves. Yam or casaba or whatever it was, they ate with that as well. And okay, there was a little bit of cannibalism that went on in Fiji. There was a guy called Andre. It's pronounced Andre, I think, but he was the cannibal king of Fiji. I'm going off on a massive tangent here, and he ate like 900 people, and every time he ate someone, he put a white stone outside his house, and I think he was trying to get he was trying to eat 1,000 people because if he thought that if he ate 1,000 people, he would gain immortality. So that happened. That was only about 150 years ago, so not that far off. Anyway, but aside from the cannibalism, the Fijians generally could feed themselves and they led a good life. And then the British turned up and said, "Why aren't you working?" And they went, "What? Why aren't you working? Why aren't you saving up for your pension? Why aren't you got a bank account?" And like, bank accounts, pensions, what the hell would they want with that? We have old people in the village and the young people look after them because they can't fish or hunt anymore. So the young people do that, and then we share it all because we're all family. No, the British didn't like that. So what did the British do? They couldn't get these Fijians to work because why would you? Absolutely 100% sympathy with the Fijians here because they're like, you've come from the other side of the planet to tell us to do this thing that we've never done before, and it seems a bit weird. What's this concept of money? Do you know what I mean? They didn't really have money, I don't think. As we think of it on Fiji. They did have these giant stone coins on the island of Yap in the Federated States of Micronesia, but that's another story. Gotta go. I like to go off on my little tangents, don't I? Anyway, so what the British did was they brought across a bunch of indentured labourers, workers from India, and they transported them to Fiji. And a lot of the problems politically and socially that Fiji have at the moment stem from the fact that a bunch of people from thousands of miles away picked up another bunch of people from thousands of miles away and dumped them on this very small island group in the Pacific Ocean. I went, there you go, cheers guys, see ya, we're leaving you now, enjoy independence. And so that's just one example of just when that was the British. I could talk about the Belgians in the Congo, which is a disgusting story from top to bottom. Talk about the French in Algeria, just a disgusting story from top to bottom. I mean, you got to talk about the British in all over the world, and there's always tales of terror and that trauma and that upset and the problems that we left. For example, when the Portuguese pulled out of Angola and Mozambique in 1975, I think there was like one university graduate left in the whole country. It was like that. When the UK pulled out of Jamaica, I think in the 60s, there was hardly any people who were black living in Jamaica who had even been schooled, because the British set up schools and then said, "Oh, only the white kids can go to these schools." So it was like the biggest brain drain imaginable, because they took out anyone who knew what they were doing out of the country. They left overnight, pretty much. I mean, the handover of power in a lot of these places around the world that the British messed up and the Portuguese messed up and the French messed up. You can see where places like Singapore, where there was a long, drawn-out handover process, Malaya, as it used to be Malaysia and Singapore were one country called Malaya for about a year, and then they split up into two. And they're doing all right now. Whereas somewhere where we pulled out overnight, like India, there was supposed to be a 5-year transition period. And instead of that, we did it Lord bloody dickhead, what's his name? The guy who got blown up in his boat. Mountbatten. Mountbatten turned up in India and went, no, we don't need 5 years, handover period, we'll do it in 6 months. Chop, chop. And then they brought over a cartographer from the UK who had never been to India before, and he drew a line down a map and said, there you go, that's West Pakistan, there's India, there's East Pakistan. Enjoy, bye, see ya. And 1 million people died. 1 million people died. I can't stress that enough. 1 million people freaking died. So, yeah. So my point is that a lot of the problems in the world right now, especially to do with developing nations, and don't forget the vast majority of the 56 countries of the Commonwealth are impoverished. They're developing nations. That's not a coincidence, right? So a lot of the people coming from these places, whatever's happening there has been exacerbated by their history, which has something to do with us, and by the fact that this is the best way that it's ever been described. It was a woman during the Black Lives Matter protests where she said, it's a bit like you're invited to play a game of Monopoly, but everyone else has been playing for 200 years and all of the properties are taken. And you're given the dice and said, there you go, you can play now. And yeah, but all the property's been taken. So all the things are set up. So it's not like there's going to be a company from Botswana that's going to be able to take Coca-Cola on, because that slot has already been taken up. You're not going to get a company from Bhutan that's going to kick Apple's ass when it comes to making iPhones. It's just not going to happen. All those slots have been taken. All those squares have got houses on and hotels, and you really don't stand a chance. And that's what essentially Europe has done to the rest of the world, with a few notable exceptions. A place like America, which, if the Europeans in America feel threatened, oh my God, what the world caves in. So Europe must take, as a whole, some responsibility for the fact that there are so many people coming from other countries into Europe, because where they are living is just it's just untenable, And this is something that I think that we've discussed a little bit in terms of reparations and in terms of overseas developments. And people say, oh, we shouldn't be giving money to other countries, we should look after our own first. But then at the same time, they complain about people claiming asylum. And you're like, well, if we help develop these countries, then people are going to want to leave. I would like to see the EU, the UN have more teeth. And if the EU got together, we could make the UN have more teeth. I'd like to see the UN reform, to be honest with you, giving more votes to countries that are democratic and have a free and fair election process and free and fair press and all that kind of stuff. Measure it by the democracy index or different, ways of measuring this stuff, and give countries more votes depending on, not necessarily the size, a little bit of that, but also the fact that they've got, equality. They've got rights for LGBT, QI plus, QAI plus people. That's something that we could do, but I don't think the UN's going to change anytime soon. So it's down to Europe to increase overseas aid. Look at what happened in Libya. At least 20,000 people, it looks like, are dead now in Libya. And that cataclysmic incident happened because of two things, right? Climate change, number one. It happened because of climate change. Let's not argue about that. We are seeing massive storms like never before. We all know Libya is a desert region. It's the desert. It's known as being a desert. Having the most amount of rainfall has ever been recorded there is not normal, okay? And this sort of thing is happening more increasingly. But the conflict between East and West Libya has exacerbated the problem here. And it meant that those two dams that failed, were not being maintained because of all the social upheaval. If those dams were maintained, there's a good chance they wouldn't have been breached. And if they weren't breached, thousands of people wouldn't have died. That's our responsibility. Now that town is completely screwed. And we're going to be seeing refugees coming from there, I guess, more climate refugees coming across. You look at what happened in Morocco or in Turkey, where they had these massive earthquakes, and you could go, that's awful. What can you do about an earthquake? Well, you can build buildings that are earthquake proof. How do you do that? Well, it costs money. That investment could be put in there by Europe. And it's something that Europe is trying to do. Don't get me wrong. I know that there's a bit of a thing towards it, but I'd like to see more, because otherwise, in the long run, it's just going to impact us. It's like, I don't care what my neighbor does. Okay, so your neighbor has no money, comes around and says, listen, I could really do with a small loan, just keep me head above water. You say no, nothing to do with me. I need to look after my own. My kids need this, my kids need that. I don't care about you. Your neighbor goes back and their house falls into disrepair. And what happens to you is your house becomes worth less, not worthless, but worth less on the housing market because the house next door has all the windows smashed in. And maybe it's been a fire, maybe it's been gutted, but it affects you. Your community affects you. The other people in the world affect each other, you know? No man is an island, etc. So I was only going to do this. I was only going to do this little monologue for 15 minutes, but I have gone on a little bit. Sorry. And we got Purity Chat. Thank you, Graham. Got to go to the meeting. So I've lost Emma already. Gary Arnold, thank you very much for the £2 super chat, mate. That's really appreciated. And yes, just a couple of other things that were in the news yesterday that I just wanted to pick up on. One of which was our friend Patsy Stevenson, who was the woman who was arrested at the Sarah Everard vigil a few years ago. You know, that famous picture of the woman with the red hair, striking red hair, looking up at the camera while she was being pinned down by several police officers. Patsy's tiny. Patsy's like 5 foot nothing, if that. And the idea that she was putting up such a fight is ridiculous. Anyway, she has been given compensation by the Met, and she was given an apology, although it was a very half-arsed apology, an incredibly half-arsed apology. I don't know if you saw any of the interviews she did yesterday. She was on Radio 4 in the morning. She was also on LBC in the afternoon talking about her experience. And she really put the situation across. And she's still traumatized by what happened. And the Met Police don't really have a leg to stand on in all this. Also in the news yesterday was that Stephen Barclay, our health minister for some reason, Secretary of State for Health, is going to bring in what's called Martha's Law. So this is for Martha Mills, who was a young girl. She was only 13, daughter of Mary P. Mills, who fell off a bike. She fell off a bike and she damaged herself internally, and they went to the hospital because of a combination of factors. It was a bank holiday weekend. They couldn't get the staff that they needed to speak to, but the main thing was they couldn't get a second opinion. And one person was like, no, it's fine. It's nothing to worry about. You know, she was bleeding. And they're saying, oh, it's perfectly normal. They thought that she might have sepsis or something. And it turned out that whatever they thought it wasn't. So Martha's Law is going to, when it comes in, is going to mean that everyone has a right as a parent or patient or partner of a patient or next of kin, whatever, to say, I want a second opinion in emergency situations where they feel like something's not quite right. At the moment, you don't have a right to a second opinion, which seems a bit mad to me, but that's going to be brought in, so that's fantastic. But my heart really does go out to Mary P., who was the student direct editor when I was in Manchester, and these stories are a little bit close to home for me, and my heart goes out to both Patsy and Mary P. for, obviously very different reasons, but both very strong, capable, very smart women who were massively let down by the system, and particularly probably by the misogyny inherent in the system. And then finally, it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to have to sign off very soon. I just want to mention Hunter Biden's laptop. Not his laptop, just Hunter Biden. I know we don't really cover American news that much on this channel, but I'm just going to mention, thank you very much to One Angry Pagan there for the £5 super chat. The global north will have to do more forward thinking, especially in terms of accommodation for those trying to escape the worst of climate crisis. Yes, absolutely. One Angry Pagan. I'd love to help with that. That would be one of my dream jobs. It would be to help mitigate, what the incoming disaster that is climate change that we can't really stop now, but we can, mitigate the worst of it. But yeah, anyway, so but yeah, organising where people are going and stuff like that, and helping people out in that way would be a nice job to have. I haven't drank any of my tea yet. Be going cold. So Hunter Biden's laptop. So Hunter Biden is the son of the President of the United States. Now he's just been indicted on three felony counts of buying a gun. And I've just got to mention this because I just find it absolutely hilarious. So this is what the Republicans gone after. He bought a gun. And it's like, yeah, and what's the problem with that? But he was a drug addict at the time. And you're like, okay, but the Republicans just spent the last few years trying to make it so even though you're an ex-con, a drug addict, a paedophile, whatever, a serial killer, you can still get a gun in America because they want to There's nothing in the Constitution to say you can't get a gun if you're a drug addict. But they put this in, and you got to understand, like, the statute of limitation on this particular crime is 5 years. This crime was done 4 years and 11 months ago. So this is the last possible chance they've got to pin something on him. And this has never been done before. People have gone down for this kind of stuff, but it's always been tagged on to something else. It's always been like, oh, well, we're doing you for drug dealing. And also you bought that gun and you said that you weren't addicted to, you got to sign a little thing that says, do you have mental health problems? Are you addicted to a substance? And you say no, and then they give you a gun. And they say, oh, you lied on the form. You lied. I guess it's the same sort of thing. Like, you know, when you used to go to America before they brought in Esther, and you had that little piece of paper to sign on the plane, and it'll say, are you coming here to commit immoral acts? And you're flying into Las Vegas, and you're like, well, I better put no, but or like the one that says, are you coming here to commit acts of terrorism? And you're just like, who would tick yes? Oh, yeah. Oh, shit. I've been caught. And then the idea that they're just going to turn around and say, have you been arrested for blowing up loads of people and calling all this murder and mayhem? They go, but you said you wouldn't. You know, they hold up the little chitty and say, you ticked this saying that you weren't going to commit an act of terror. So not only are you a terrorist, you're a liar too. But anyway, but the fact is that this particular crime is normally packaged with something else. So if you get done for drug dealing, it will be like drug dealing plus you bought a gun when you shouldn't have bought a gun. But to use it in isolation is hilarious because it absolutely 100%, I think, hinges on Hunter Biden saying, yeah, I was an addict. If he says no, how do you know what was going on in his head? How do you prove it in a court of law? I'm really fascinated. It's just, it's really just, it piques my interest because I'm like, what? How does this even work? But we will see. Anyway, so thanks, Graham. What's this? What's this, Julian? Go away. Sorry, I should have been moderating the chat a bit better today. I haven't done that. Right, I'm going to be back at 1 o'clock, so see you later. I'll be back at 1 o'clock for the agenda with Phil Moorhouse, and then we'll be back again I'll be back again at 9 o'clock for the Labour Social tonight. So grab a can of beer or glass of wine or bottle of rum, whatever's your poison, and join us for that. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, and thanks for super chats and thanks for all of your comments. Even the arguey ones, which probably I should have been a little bit more on the ball for, but I'm very sorry. Okay, so I'll leave you in the capable hands of James O'Brien if you want to go and listen to LBC. If you are a patron or a YouTube member, you can head over to the Discord server now. I'm going to be there for the next half an hour doing Morning Brew Extra. So I'll see you for that. And otherwise, and if you're not going to join us for anything else today, have a great weekend. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.